So here's our fundamental dilemma, as I see it, is that the reason architecture is so important is because it makes us agile. It allows us to be agile. And part of the reason it's been a hard sell is people don't get that. So they get that maybe it could save us some money. They get that it might mitigate some risks. But they don't quite get that it will make us agile, and that fundamentally that allows us to survive, if not thrive, in a digital economy. So our dilemma is we have to sell agility. And it's not an easy thing to sell because people have trouble getting their arms around it. And note that the way we think of agility is just the ability to regularly use capabilities to generate new business value while limiting costs and risk. So it's this idea that we get things in place and basically they become new habits, successful habits for the digital economy. That's what we're trying to get across, and it's a kind of gooey idea. So what we're trying to do is add some substance to it, make it real for business people. And as I note in the final statement here, we cannot drive benefits if everyone in our organizations is not on board. And I think what we've tended to do is give up. We kind of go, well, okay, everybody doesn't get it, I'll do what I can do. Actually, wrong answer. What we've learned from the people who do succeed is they make the most important thing getting everybody on board, even though it is often the most frustrating thing. So we're going to talk a bit about how we're going to get everybody on board with enterprise architecture, because I think you already know once you accomplish that, really good things are going to happen. So let's talk about how we're going to make that happen. First of all, I think there's three very important questions we have to ask every business person. The first question is, in your firm, how long do business strategies last? How about in your firm? How long does a business strategy last, sir? 3 years? Ma'am, how long does one last in your firm? 5 years. That's pretty good. In your firm?
We're not really good at making business.
You don't even have business strategies. This is also a fundamental problem. Yes. So, so maybe a year, maybe 3 years, maybe 5 years. Anybody would say 20, 30 years in your organization? No. Okay. So we're going to talk at 3 to 5 years. All right. In your firm, how long do you typically use a system once it's in place? 20 years? 25 years? 30 years, right? Yeah, forever. Okay, so here's our fundamental disconnect, right? How do we align IT with business strategy? How do you do that? Let me see if your firm is like most. Go ahead. Aha. And how do those get started? Who has the ideas for those?
Generally business people or the relationship.
Oh, okay. So a business person has a great idea. It's associated with some strategy that's going to last 3 to 5 years. And they have a great idea for a system that will enable that strategy to work. And how long will it be before you get the system in place? 3 to 5 years. Okay. Okay, I think I don't have to explain that anymore. So this is what we get. This is what we get. We get a system that delivered on a great idea, and another system that delivered on a great idea, a strategy we'll call it, and another one, and another one, and another one. Of course, this is a very simplified picture. And so we have all of these systems that are aligned with strategies that no longer exist. We then got some more strategies, and what we realized was that this system was going to have to talk to this system, and so the IT people tied it together. They wired it. And then other things had to talk with other things, and the next thing we knew, all of our systems are wired together, right? And they work. This is the amazing thing. They work. But they also are very messy. And this is not just our system world. This is our business processes. This is how we do business. And then we wonder why things go wrong. Why is the data bad? Because this is the way we function. And I will argue that it is because we align IT with business strategy and not the reverse. There's our strategy, our problem. We align IT with business strategy, not the reverse. Now, how are you going to sell this one, right? Okay, let me give you some ideas. So obviously, nobody wants this. I once showed this picture to an architect at an investment bank. And he said to me, yeah, that's about right. And he said, 80% of our code is the wires. 80%. And then he paused and he said, it is a miracle our systems work. Think about it. It's a miracle our systems work. So all of us, IT people, miracle workers. Not the fate we really wanted. So I would argue what we really intended to have emerge from all those systems that were aligned with strategies was something like this. I call it a digitized platform. The idea being that we have this core underlying infrastructure on which we have this set of, shared technology, shared applications, shared data, shared processes. It's the essence of our organization, the things that we just have to get right all the time. I mean, there's nothing glamorous about this. This is basically our core transaction processes, or one way of thinking of it is the things in our company that are not changing, or at least should not be changing. We have customers, we plan to have customers forever. If we're an airline, we're going to put people on planes. We're going to be putting people on planes forever. So there's just this set of things that, in fact, is stable. If we're in an old industry, it's probably a lot of things, big platform. If we're in a fairly new technology-based industry, maybe it's new enough that the platform's actually fairly minimalist. But part of what we're trying to figure out is what's stable about our organization, and how do we wire that in very neatly so that it just works every time? Management shouldn't pay any attention to it because it works. And then they put all of their attention on the things that they can do to make themselves unique. This is what we're aiming for, right? So what we're looking for is a digitized platform that takes care of making us a digital business, that ensures that our transactions will be accurate, consistent, high quality, low risk. That's what we're looking for. And in some companies, this is one big thing. I mean, in some companies, this is SAP, right? And in other companies, it's highly customized. But in either case, we should have some kind of digitized platform, unless we're such a new business that we can't quite figure out how we're going to succeed as a business, in which case this won't do us any good. But once we're kind of established and we have to be efficient and all that, we need this to survive in a digital economy. Okay? So if we look at UPS, we get a good sense of how this works. In 1987, UPS, which has been around for 80 years, is being challenged by Federal Express. Not because Federal Express is better at delivering packages, but because Federal Express can track them. And UPS goes, what a dumb idea. Why would a customer want to know where their package is unless it's in their hands? This is their attitude for 2-3 years. And then one day the CEO wakes up and says, nope, our customers care. They want package tracking. So he goes out, hires his first CIO, and he says, Frank, I want you to build me a package tracking application. Now Frank, who was actually expecting to become the CFO, goes, I don't know anything about package tracking applications, or IT for that matter. I'm going to go study this. So he goes off and he studies it, and he comes back to the CEO and he says, Oz, I have an important message for you. And the CEO says, what's that? He says, you don't want a package tracking application. The CEO says, of course I do. That's why I hired you. And he said, no, you want a package tracking capability. What's the difference? And he said, well, a package tracking capability begins with a package database. One, forever and ever. And of course, this is the first he's ever really thought about IT, so he goes, well, yeah, good idea, of course. And he said, no, you don't understand. It will quickly not be just one unless we make sure that anybody who ever needs information or has data that goes into our systems can get to the one database. And he says, sounds good. So that means global telecommunications. Okay. It means everybody who's running around and needs to get to data can get to it. Handheld device. Okay. And then, only then, does it mean an application. Got it. Of course, the only way this can work is if everybody who puts data in and gets data out does it the same way or we're going to destroy the data. And it all made sense because UPS is the world's leading industrial engineering company, so they completely got this. So off they go. They already had standardized processes. That's really a huge benefit when you're putting this in. And the next thing we know, UPS, $11 billion later, has a digitized platform. This, we believe, is what every company eventually wants to build. Now, UPS was lucky. In the late 1980s, it didn't have much legacy. Now, this gets harder and harder and harder because most of the companies that are trying to build this are building it in an environment where they have to tear a lot out and put it in. So it's a more gradual experience. But this, I would argue, is what every company needs in order to function as a digital business. Now, here's what's going to challenge our efforts. We are obviously in a world where every day we have to be innovating with technology. And as we do that, there is a real likelihood that we're just going to keep building things that everybody wants. And we're going to create that mess that I showed you. I call it the cold spaghetti diagram. So here's the cold spaghetti. I call it that because, of course, if I try to extract anything, there's a huge risk that I'm going to break it. So here's my cold spaghetti diagram. And that does not make me agile because anytime I need to change something, I'm going to have to figure out how to extract something, put something new in, and not break anything. If I want these individual innovations to make me agile, I got to go about this by taking individual innovations that are going to contribute to or leverage my digitized platform. And the only way I'm going to succeed at that is if I go through an architectural compliance process, figure out how these pieces fit together, or say to myself, I'm really talking about a totally different part of the business, so I'm really not going to relate it back later to everything else in the business. I have that option, okay? So this is how we want our entire organization to be thinking. If we can get them all thinking this way, we can build a platform, we can leverage a platform, and that means we got to get them thinking about architecture. And notice, we want to make sure that everybody understands that architecture is the design of our IT and business process capabilities. It's the blueprint for our process and IT capabilities. If we can get that language across, as opposed to letting people think that this has something to do with, say, technology standards, which if we go deep enough it does, but they don't need to know that. This is about designing how we're going to get the organization's business done. That's what we're designing, okay? So it, in essence, provides the design of our digitized platforms. That's the kind of the simple way of thinking about enterprise architecture. Okay, so some of you would have seen this picture before. Let me just explain why I think this is important for every business person to understand. We want business people to understand that when we are a brand new business, we're looking for good ways to make money. And we're going to respond with any kind of technology solution that works. We're just going to build it. And that's going to be cool because if we're like lucky, like Google, we're going to make a ton of money doing this kind of thing. But after a while, we try this, we try that, we try that, we try that, we respond to another moment, we acquire another company. The next thing we know, we have a mess. And then we say, uh-oh, now that we've kind of figured out our niche, we've got competitors, they're coming in with a cheaper business model, we've got to become efficient, we've got to get faster. That means we're going to have to clean up our environment, our spaghetti. We start with the technology piece of this. I actually thought companies were starting with the technology piece of it just because it was easy. It was a scapegoat. Wow, let's just blame IT. Our systems are a mess. Our processes are a mess. Let's just say it's IT's fault. We'll blame them. But I've learned that actually that might be part of the story. It's not the whole story. The rest of it is you can't build a company to rely on technology if IT is not deploying world-class processes and methodologies. So you really do have to do that first. It actually is essential. So all the effort we see going into ITIL and all that kind of stuff, very well spent because it provides us with the underlying technology capability to be a digital business. But it's certainly nowhere close to enough. Once we get kind of our core technology capability in place, then we become a digital business, by defining and building that digitized platform. And for some companies, this is pretty simple. You know, we've got the diversified businesses, and there's not a whole lot that we want them all to do the same. So we're not talking about a lot of standardization across the entire organization, but we want, say, a platform of shared services to cut out costs and enable Sarbanes-Oxley requirements. So that's kind of the simplest end to we're a package delivery company where every single transaction could at some time be affected by some other transaction. So everything in the company has to be end-to-end integrated, standardized, disciplined, the whole bit. So this third stage is very different depending on who you are, but in the end, you're building a digitized platform. And then we get to this stage where we say, all right, we kind of got the core in place. How do we drive benefits from it? How do we start to find the components that if we reuse them, we become a really successful business? That's our fourth stage. And we have studied now around 75 to 100 companies, I've lost track, going through these stages. Mini and sometimes maxi case studies of companies going through these stages. And they fundamentally transform. They are totally different businesses by the middle of the third stage, when they really start to get that platform in place. They are fundamentally different. And notice there are companies that go out and put in SAP and never really fundamentally transform themselves. They go backwards. Then there are other companies that say, we're putting in a platform, and they behave differently, and they reorganize themselves, and they think differently. They're ready to go forward. Now, these stages we've learned are actually really important to understand, because if you decide you just want to be, say, a componentized modular business, you would be inclined to go from wherever you were, let's say stage 1, to stage 4. And in fact, I had an investment banker tell me he was going to do that. He was the CIO, and he said, I got this figured out. I can't get the business leaders to take any interest in disciplining their thinking. There's just no interest in it. He said they don't want to work together, they don't want to share data, they don't want to think alike, they don't want to standardize any processes, but they want a single face to the customer, and they want to operate like a digital business. So we're going to skip from stage 1 to stage 4 by putting in web services, because you can take these little components and you can reuse them. I went, that's an interesting idea. I want to understand how that goes, so I'll be back in 2 years. So 2 years later, I went back, and I talked to his successor. and he said, oh, yeah, those web services, that was a dumb idea. He said, you can make web services. You can make thousands of web services. The trick is getting them reused. And, of course, it is. I don't have to tell this to an enterprise architect. So our problem is that we have to go through the stages, but the real bonanza is really at the end. That's where we get the operational excellence, the business agility, the managerial satisfaction. And we have done multiple statistical studies on this, and it's really true. All of those things go up as companies go through the stages. But the good news is they start going up right away. As soon as you start disciplining an organization and make them think about architecture in that second stage, your performance does start going up. You do not have to wait till you're done. So I would argue that this is a journey that is well worthwhile. I did once have a CIO say to me, oh, Jeanne, I do not believe you that you have to go through all those stages. We were in stage 1. We put in SAP to get to stage 3. I said, oh, did that work? He said, well, you mean the first time, the second time, the third time, or the fourth time we put in SAP? Think about it. This is the pain we put our organizations through if we don't quite get what we're doing, right? So here's what we've learned. Now, these are our latest numbers. We collected these last fall with CIO Magazine, trying to understand where companies are in the journey, and you get a sense of the distribution. This is a huge progression. I probably should have put in the 2007 numbers, but it's a huge progression from 3 years ago. 3 years ago, we had 2% of companies here and 27% here. So we had fewer than a third of the companies had really made progress on a digitized platform. And now we see significant movement. The reason this is notable, I think, is it means that more and more companies are building platforms, and thus it is becoming a competitive necessity. The problem we run into is it is possible to slide backwards. You go out and acquire another company, and you probably will. So this is not totally ensured that you'll just keep moving forward and you'll get really good at reusing your components. But this is the journey that we are on. Okay? Now I want to go quickly through a few slides. Before I do that, any questions, comments, challenges to any of this? Okay. I just want to slip through a few slides here quickly. The main point of this slide is part of the reason we're going to have trouble convincing business people about the stages and the journey they need to go on and the reason they have to care about enterprise architecture is because it hurts. When you are in stage one, you're a business person that gets to go to IT and say, this is what I want, I've got the money, you do it. And IT does. Many IT organizations have described themselves to me as order takers. This is our job. In stage one, that is exactly the job. When we get to stage two, we already have IT pushing back. IT saying things like, well, we have our technology standards. We can do this for you, but we can't quite do it the way you want it, but not to worry, it'll be good. But in effect, we're saying IT is going to push back. You're going to get the 80% solution instead of the 100% solution. And the immediate reaction is, I don't like that. Why should I do business that way? Now, most business people will get over that pretty quickly when they see that it's lower cost and faster. But the immediate reaction is quite negative. Then what tends to happen, and I think we've learned a lot, so it doesn't always happen, is there's this awful moment where we say, and now that we've got the technology base in, we're going to put in something big like SAP. We're going to rip out everything you ever knew, and we're going to put in new systems, and you're going to do it the way we tell the entire organization to do it. And it might be a lot of processes or just a few. It doesn't matter. They don't like it. And so we show their kind of attitude there towards architecture maturity as very negative in this third stage. It turns out that if you get through it okay, if you don't give up, you do rebound. And we don't have enough history yet in stage 4, but we suspect that red line goes very high. There's this sense that life is good again. We've got this base that we don't have to worry about, and we have these opportunities to do new and better things. Yeah?
So one of the questions I have when you get to the centralized core is businesses, you may look at the enterprise as a whole, businesses have their own cycle. Individual businesses may face severe market disruption, requiring them to go back to the front, simply because that silo business can't operate as part of the whole.
Yes.
You look at Twitter, Facebook,
Yeah.
How would you look at this picture through the eyes of the business who has to change?
Yeah, well, so a couple things are going on here. When we get to the third stage, we have certainly seen some corporate decisions that are not quite sensible. So we're just going to put SAP out there. Everybody's going to behave the same. There are no real differences. They should just do it our way. And in fact, it's just not enlightened. It's not really true. There are differences. There are important differences, and you shouldn't be doing that to the business. So part of this reflects a very real situation where people are trying to do things that don't make sense for the business. And I think part of the answer to your specific question is we got to be careful. We got to be careful about our reach. And if we try to do either too much, things that shouldn't be done, we're going to run into problems. If we try to do it too fast, we're going to run into problems. And if we try to include things that we could just say, well, you know, there's some unique things there. Let's do 80%, not 100%. Let's let some unusual things go on, because we're going to start defining how we're going to do business. It's good to keep experimenting with other options, and we should keep that straight. So sometimes it really is that we've defined the vision badly, and we just kind of bulldoze in there and try to make it happen, and it shouldn't. So I think that's part of it. I think the answer is really more complex than I've just given, but in the short one, we'll go with that. But sometimes for good reasons, sometimes for bad reasons, the people involved in this are really pushing back. And when I first started studying ERPs in 1997, I was told I was going to find huge resistance because people don't want to change. I will tell you that is not what I found. What I found was huge confusion because people didn't know what the heck was expected of them. That's what I found. They wanted their company to succeed. And sure, there's exceptions to that, but realistically, people want their business to succeed. And to just say, oh, it's resistance, is really oversimplifying the problem here. As one business person told me, you know, I get why we did this. I get why we totally transformed our company. I get why we changed all our systems. And in the future, it's going to be great. But I have to tell you, the experience is, I've been here 27 years. I learned a lot about this business, and I retained it, and I felt smart about the business. And when there was a problem, I knew how to solve it. They took all of my knowledge and threw it in a dump. It's gone. It's worthless. And now they're trying to teach me new things. They give me a week's worth of training. They tell me to go off and do it. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm doing. And we're asking about resistance. So part of this is effective change management. And I'll talk a minute about Campbell when we get there. Okay? This is too busy a slide for me to spend any time on. But the point it was supposed to make is that it will be a transformation. We are going to change the way we spend money. We're going to change the way we think about IT. We're going to spend the amount of money we spend on IT. This number, I think, is stunning. We did this on a consumer price index basis and said, well, everybody saves money in stage 2. You spend less on IT in stage 2 than in stage 1 because in most cases, the reason you even went to stage 2 is business got frustrated with IT, fired the CIO, and brought in somebody who promised to cut costs. And so they did. And it turned out to be a really good thing because business people were told, well, there's no budget for this, that, and the other thing, and suddenly they had to curb their appetites. Then we went off and we built some big platform, started spending more on IT, and by the time we got to stage 4, we were spending a fortune on IT. But here's the good news. Nobody minded. By then, they're all going, wow, IT is so valuable to this firm that they've expanded IT's responsibilities. It includes manufacturing, shop controls, it includes operations, it includes business process outsourcing, it includes all kinds of things. So we are spending more in that IT budget, but the IT budget is defined so differently, we just don't think about it anymore. So it's not that we don't think about how much we spend anymore, we don't think about it the way we used to think about it. So this is what we're trying to take our companies through. And in the process, we are going to learn a lot about how to do business differently. And I'm going to summarize this whole thing. I'm glad they handed it out because if I had to explain this whole thing, it would take a long time, but you can reference it later. The essence of this table is that your world changes. And you stop thinking about one project with one ROI and one person leading the change to how's our enterprise going to behave differently and how are we fundamentally going to rethink things so that we do enterprise strategic priorities instead of individual strategic priorities. How are we going to make that happen? Because this is not easy. It's a learning process. We're going to learn it by acquiring entirely new competencies. So the companies, and like I said, it's about 10% now that are good at it, 11% if you look at our statistics there. What these companies have are competencies that others are just starting to build. They actually have a competency in architecture, planning, and design. We have this concept we call the operating model. It says to senior management, just tell us 2 things. What do you want standardized in this company, process-wise? What do you want standardized? And what do you want integrated? Just answer that question. What do you want standardized? What do you want integrated? Turns out companies in the 4th stage can answer that question. Anybody in that company can answer that question. But most companies never stop to think about it. And so it's very hard to build systems that create a platform when you don't know what you want integrated and standardized. That's the essence of the challenge. The second capability or competency they've built is around project management. They have a lot of discipline. They know how much value they're getting from their projects. I once interviewed a CTO who said, you know, I just started this new job, and I said to the IT people, so how did we do in this company last year on delivering the business case for each of the projects? And they all said to me, well, That's not our job. We just deliver, and then business drives the value. And she said, yeah, well, how do we do? What percent of the new systems delivered their business case? She said they had no idea. So I said, well, you have to go out and find out. We need to know this. This is a critical metric for us. So they did. They went out and checked. What percent do you think met their business case? A quarter? Zero. Zero. Why would any of them? Nobody was checking. And in fact, the extraordinary companies start measuring the business value and tweaking their expectations about the day that they start the project. Every major stage gate, they stop and they say, okay, is the business case still right? Is this still what we expect? Is it still realistic? Do we still care? Because if any of the answers are no, we got to fix something. We either stop the project, or we change the expectation, or we do something different. We've got to be watching this from day one. There should be no surprise when this thing is delivered. And yet, when we go from company to company, this is a discipline we don't have in most of our organizations. Essential. The CIO at Southwest Airlines spends every Wednesday doing nothing but going through projects with stakeholders that need to be responsible for the ultimate outcome, saying, where is this project? What are the problems it's having? What should we be changing? Who needs help? Let's get these things done. 50 projects, all 50 major projects in that company, go through these stage gates, and they don't get any surprises. There are no surprises there. So I think this is the essence of what we need to be doing. Standards management, they know how to define standards, they know how to retire standards, they know how to have exceptions to standards. These are things we all work on. There is a qualitative difference in the companies who do it well. And finally, IT funding. We really do learn how to fund enterprise priorities and let the rest go. We learn how to say no. And we learn how to get people together. One of the case studies we've done that fascinated me was at Pepsi Americas, which sadly has been bought by PepsiCo, so I can't study them anymore. But their CIO started in 2001 on an enterprise architecture journey. And I was fortunate enough to get to meet him very early in this journey. And he was describing what he wanted to do and the information that he thought was going to be essential to the organization and how the company was going to have to recreate itself. Because the design of the company at the time was around truck drivers who would load up their trucks, run to little stores, and empty them out. And he said, you know, the model's broken because we used to have 30 SKUs, and now we have 300. And the drivers can't possibly guess right. They just can't know. Meanwhile, you got Walmart saying, do not bring things to the store, bring them to our warehouse, and only the things we want. Well, we're not designed to do this. So he said, we have to totally change the way we do business here. So he started on this journey of working with senior management about his vision, about their vision, about how they were going to do things. And he said, at first it was awful. I'd bring people together, and I'd say, okay, now together, we have to define how we're going to do business. And he said, we had these 13 regional managers because the company had been formed by the mergers of 13 companies, so 13 regions. And they would get in the room, and one guy would say, okay, here's what I want. Johnny, you vote for mine. I'll vote for whatever you want. And that was the way the whole conversation went. And here's this poor CIO who really has vision going, no. But he just kept working at it and working at it and working at it. He had great technologists developing new capabilities. And then he'd go in and say, now look what you can do. You can do something you could never do before. And 9 years later, they were phenomenal. They had an information backbone with great data from which they were developing algorithms that not only improved their performance in terms of accurate estimates of how much Pepsi they needed, it enabled them to price it better, to differentiate by customer. It improved their customers' out of stocks from 14% down to 3%. Their customers, they were telling their customers what to order. And they were doing all of this because they had stopped thinking about what everybody wanted and said, we got to start thinking about what our customers want. That's the essence of what we have to do differently. And then we build this capability, and then we learn how to operate appropriately, and we introduce some process standards, and then we introduce data standards, and then we get people who care about those data standards, and then we start using the data, and that helps us improve the data, and we just get better and better and better. And he said it took 9 years, and then he said to me, and the most important thing, it was that there was no turnover in senior management. He said, I cannot imagine what would have happened to me if the guys had started leaving and I had to start over again training someone, because it took me 9 years. But at about the 5th year, we went in and interviewed the senior management team, and they would say things like, we were so lucky we had put in this system that helped us do things right. And I'm going, lucky? What an interesting term. So this is the journey. It's about persistence. It's about learning. It's about sticking with it. It's about vision. And we just don't give up. And then everything we do, we drive value from. We make sure somebody out there is going to take it and do something great with it. Because if nobody's going to do something great with it, here's the thing that's hard for an IT person to believe. But if nobody's going to do anything great with the capability, don't build it. It will be wasted. It will be money spent, and then it will be wasted. Now, you want to get a little bit ahead of the curve, so that's the tricky part. But this is the dilemma that every great IT person faces, every great architect. Okay, so here's what we learned, and I think this is kind of fascinating, about how we progress in our learning. We learned, we said, so what distinguishes the great companies? And we learned that it turns out when you're in that first stage, just building systems so you can see what works, you only have to do 2 things well. Learn how to build a business case and develop a good methodology. Now, in fact, most companies do not do that in stage 1, but if you did, you'd get more from stage 1, and it would make the transition to stage 2 easier. Then in stage 2, learn how to manage your standards. Start thinking about funding infrastructure. Teach people how to do exceptions to standards. If we get good at that, we're ready to move into stage 3, where we can start thinking about process ownership and enterprise vision and senior executive oversight of IT initiatives. That's going on in stage 3. I don't actually know why the things in stage 4 turned out statistically there, but I will tell you that those are the things that it turned out people didn't get value from. That was the question. Are you getting value from these initiatives? They were not getting value from them till stage 4. Notice that one of the things in there is full-time enterprise architecture team. That's the 5%, I guess. That data was probably when there was still 5% in stage 4. Now, hopefully, it's up to 11. This is the problem, that the enterprise architecture team, until the company gets mature, isn't really appreciated. I would bet it's because the enterprise architecture team is in IT. If it was somewhere else, it would work better. At Swiss Re, the CIO said to me, when I realized that I needed an architect, and they already had a platform in place, it's quite an impressive platform, so when I realized I had to have an enterprise architect, I asked the COO to hire one. I said, we need an architect. You should hire one, and he'll tell you how to do business. And the COO unbelievably said, good idea, went out and hired an architect. The architect was brilliant. He had all these ideas about end-to-end processes and how they could do process optimization and how they would have process owners and how they could componentize processes. He was brilliant. And the COO is just going, wow, this is great, and introducing really good architectural concepts. Well, the CIO said to me, after they'd been doing this for about 3 years, and he said, I could really feel the improvement. When they came to me, they understood what they wanted. And we could put in systems and make a difference and build capabilities like we'd never been able to do before. But he said, now I'm going to bring the architect into IT. I said, you are? And he said, oh, yeah, architecture is way too important to trust it to the business people. It'll probably work because the CIO is very respected, and now that they all get architecture, it's probably fine. But it was an interesting development from where I was sitting. So here's what we learned about the best firms. This was a study of just 103 firms where we did one-on-one interviews. rather than just statistical, although we did some statistical analysis here too. And it turns out there are just 3 things that really matter if you want to get value from IT. And I shouldn't say 3 things that matter. 3 things that matter the most. All these things are correlated. All these best practices are correlated. But the 3 things that matter the most will not surprise you. First of all, senior management involvement. And maybe we should call it leadership. They just get it. They take charge. Those of you who know Charlie Feld, he's gone from organization to organization, transforming the company with IT. But he will only do it if the CEO basically begs him. If he's got a CEO who goes, we really need this, then he knows he's got the right person. Otherwise, you got a CIO who really cares, I don't really know if it's going to happen. So he makes the CEO say, yeah, I want to lead this, and I want you by my side doing it. And then he goes in. So we're looking for senior management taking charge. And, I think the inclination for a lot of IT people is go, well, I can't do that. And I actually don't think that's true. I think I have seen great IT leaders bring business people along. They just keep preaching it. They don't give up. They just don't give up. And they do little things and say, we did something little for you. You should see what you can do now. Just go out and see what you can do. And they just find little things. At Toyota Europe, they had 28 companies, 28 marketing companies and 9 manufacturing companies in Europe. That's a lot of companies in a small area. And they weren't making any money. They were selling a ton of cars, but they weren't making any money. And they're going, this isn't right. Now, this is early 2000s, so it's before their recent issues. The architect, they had a very small headquarters group in Europe, and the architect says, we got to do something about this. We should build some systems that help people communicate with one another. And I don't know if any of you are from Europe, but the concern was that they didn't like one another, the different companies, and that they wouldn't work together well. And he's European, so he's kind of recognizing that this could be a problem. And he said, okay, I got a better idea. We're going to go to all the companies, and we're going to say, there's a new rule. 1 year from today, you have to send us every night, electronically, the following inventory file. It was very detailed, but it was doable. He said, in a year you can do this. You've already got the data. You just got to clean it up so it's accurate. And you need to send it to us. And if you need any help, we'll come in. We'll put in SAP. We'll take care of you. 3 of the companies actually had them do that. They went in. But the 28 marketing companies and 9 manufacturing companies were responsible for submitting that file at the end of the day, every day, 1 year hence. Sure enough, they did. A year later, they get all this data, and the next day, they send back to all of the manufacturing and marketing companies the data. So what suddenly happened was, instead of saying, okay, I need this car or I need this part, I'll call a manufacturing company, I'll order it, they'll put it in their queue, they'll get it to me when it's ready, they started looking at the data and saying, these guys have the part I need, I think I'm just going to call them. I'll get it here tomorrow instead of Lord knows when. Or that car, I can actually use that car, I'll just take it off their lot. And the manufacturing companies could get more strategic about their planning. If a car was already ordered, it would get moved to the front instead of people ordering cars for the lot. So suddenly, and we're talking 1 year later, they went from a loss to a significant positive operating income. And I used to know the numbers, but I'd have to bring them up. So this is the kind of thinking that the great architects are doing. Let's not ask them to do something they're all going to say, oh, way too much trouble, won't have any benefits. Let's do something little. And of course, what started happening, now this was 2004 that they turned their first profit in a long time. By 2008, they had become a single Toyota Europe. It was just one company. It had evolved very naturally from that point. So this is our challenge, is to get people taking the lead, and at Scissor we call it leading from behind. You're kind of going, here, look at how you could be doing business. Now look over here, you could be doing business this way, and we can build you these capabilities. This is what the great architects are doing. The second thing is we build architecture into everything. It just becomes part of the way we do business. There are a lot of architecture teams that are off to the side. That is, as far as we can tell, pretty worthless. We need the architecture teams on every single project. You go to a place like UPS or USAA, and every project has an architect. The architect is constantly assessing the technology, the systems, the data, and looking for where you have to go with standard and where you can't go with standard, recognizing when a standard's going to be needed that's never been established, talking to their, what they call technology fellows, to go off and establish a standard and get all the research done in advance. So these companies are moving systems and capabilities through much faster than companies that aren't doing architecture in every single project. So we just see a huge difference there. And then finally, the other difference we see, and of course this is very exciting for people studying architecture, is we really did see that the most profitable companies were those that were more mature. And this is actually rather amazing, given that stage 1 companies in their early years are going to be very profitable. They're going to be very successful. It's just that they don't change as their fortunes change, and they tend to keep the habits they had that worked for them early on. So that's what's going on, is stage 1 companies are really happy and then hate to let go, and then they do. So we see stage 3 companies as more profitable. So let me just tell a very quick story about Campbell's Soup, because I think this is just what companies have to go through. I honestly believe that if your company existed before 1995, and possibly if it was created afterwards, because sooner or later, even most new companies, even if you were born in the digital economy, you find that you did create the mess. You did start letting things go because you acquired or you changed directions or whatever the case may be. So pretty much every company finds themselves in this stage 1 environment that's just kind of messy, and they have to transform. And transforming is really hard. It's very hard to do, say, while you're also acquiring or divesting, because that's also really hard. So this is a matter of putting management attention into building this platform and changing the way the company operates as a result. So in 2001, Douglas Conant comes into Campbell Soup and says, we're in trouble. We have no pipeline of new products. Financially, we're performing poorly. It's time to get serious. They're 132 years old, and they got to do something. So he hires his first global CIO, Doreen Wright, brings her in and says, I think we better think about the role of technology in all of this. And she starts working with him to redefine how they're going to do business going forward. And she cleans up IT first. She centralizes it. She improves their processes. She outsources it. And then she just takes them forward. And basically, she says, this is what we had. This is her spaghetti diagram. This is what we want. This is SAP in the middle, and everything else componentized, because she said the essence of Campbell Soup is we're a global supply chain that's basically just fulfilling orders. And, we manufacture and things. This is the essence of our company. If we get this right and digitized, then we can worry about new products and trade agreements and things that make us unique. This is all the stuff that doesn't. Okay? And so they go through the stages. There's their first stage where they're cleaning up IT. In the second stage, the first thing senior management did to really take charge was to say, there are 3 things we've got to get right, 3 things that are stable, and if we get them right, we can function far more effectively. And that is order to cash, make to ship, account to report. Yes, get them right. And they designed them, and they worked with SAP to configure them. They later added hire to retire, and they put these things in one site at a time throughout North America, which is 60% of their business. And they said the way we did this is we brought in the deployment team from the site. We redefined all the roles. We said, who's going to do what? Let's take things they know. Let's give them new things. Let's train them on their new roles and responsibilities. And then we're going to take the team out there, and then we're also going to have people from the prior implementation and people from the next implementation. And together, they're going to make sure this implementation is better than the one before. And they did this 25 times. By the time they were finished, they had it on a roll. There were no problems. Every implementation except one was better than the one before. And not only that, people who had never met one another but had the same job had met one another and had started to communicate with one another on how to take their ideas forward. And so they are simply getting better and better. Well, of course, you do this successfully. Then you say, all right, let's do the rest of the world. And they say, well, let's go to Australia. They speak English there. That actually was their thinking. Let's pick it up. It'll be just the same. We'll go. We're really good at this. We'll take the people. We'll go drop it in Australia. Doesn't work. They're going, oh, Australia is different. You know, this was the shock. It's like they speak English. They have the same products, mostly. They have a lot of similar things. Can't we just go drop it in like we did in the last 25? And they said, actually, it didn't work. There are some things different. And we had to slow down, figure it out again, start all over. We saw what we could reuse, what we couldn't reuse, and then we got it going. There was a second installation in Australia. Then we were able to go to New Zealand, and we're going, oh, okay, now we get it again. And then they said, we feel like we kind of got the international thing, but it will be slower. Every country is going to be different. We're going to have to relearn some things in every site. But then the other thing they started doing was empower their employees to get real value from their information. And this is the concept that I call working smarter. So how many of you have what you would call a platform in place in your company, some kind of digitized platform? Should be about a third of you, I hope. A little light. You're being modest. It's not quite in, right? Okay, so even as it goes in, we have to start driving benefits. This is the mistake we're making. We're so exhausted from getting it in. It's kind of like, I'll worry about getting benefits later. But in fact, it doesn't really go in if people don't quite get what the benefits are. So as it's going in, we have to be driving value. And we refer to this as working smarter. Now, here's what these 4 stages that I described to you look like to the people on the ground, okay? They're saying to themselves, all right, the company cares about 2 things in a big way. Efficiency, got to get the costs out, got to get the risk down, and strategic agility. We have to act faster in this new economy. So they say, well, if we look at this is kind of stage 1 and into stage 2. If we look at the way we use technology, we put in these solutions, but in all honesty, they only solve part of the problem, and that's okay because we have all these great people, and they just solve problems. This is your pre-digital world. Heroics. You just say to people, if something goes wrong, fix it. And they do. They just rise to the occasion. So our organizations are full of heroes, wonderful people who make the business work. And why don't they love stage 3? Because in stage 3, we start implementing processes and we say, do the standard process. Don't be a hero. Do the standard process because you'll mess something up if you don't stick with standard. So we introduce these enterprise processes. They're global processes. They're standardized. We get all kinds of benefits, scalability, efficiency, end-to-end process, or straight-through processing, single face to the customer. All these great things are happening. But we have told our people to behave differently. We have told them to be disciplined. And this is a very different world. This is you threw all my knowledge into a dump thing. And that's all good stuff, but much of the benefit has been on the efficiency side. Kind of introduce efficiencies with these platforms. A little on strategic agility, but not a lot. So the next phase from an individual's perspective is, okay, I used to be hero, now I do what I'm told, but if I really want to drive benefits, I'm going to work smarter. I'm going to take the data that the new system generates, and I'm going to use it for better decisions for our customers. So I'm going to price things better, I'm going to deliver things better, I'm going to service their problems better. I'm going to do all of that because I have better data, because we have disciplined processes. Now, it turns out that most people do not have a clue how to do that unless they are coached on doing it. So you cannot take this evidence-based management culture for granted. It is not a natural evolution from putting in your digitized platform. It is not natural. It has to be taught. And many companies don't do it. So we see a lot of companies get things in. They've put in their SAP, they've rebuilt their core banking system or whatever it is. They get here, but they start to regress in terms of actual business performance because they don't start driving benefits through this evidence-based management culture. So if we want to go the next step not just get a platform in. And I realize most of you are saying, I don't think we have a platform in. But bear in mind, as you put it in, this is what you're trying to accomplish. Your platform will be embellished with analytical tools and algorithms and constant improvements to the data itself and to the access. So you're building portals and things like that. That wonderful data allows you to identify people who can analyze the data and develop business rules. And you're constantly recognizing better and better and better business rules so that your performance keeps improving. And as you improve those business rules, you get better data, and the better data allows you to improve the business rules, so you got a nice synergy going there. Then you realize that as you're changing these business rules, you actually have to change roles. Different people have to be in charge of processes. One thing that people tend to be slow doing after they put in their platforms, they need process owners, and quite often companies assign those too low down, or they don't assign them. So if they're not up on the top, nothing great is happening. We got to put these people in. We give them responsibility for the KPIs. They start identifying business rules that are working and not working, so there's some synergy there. And they take responsibility for governing the data. And we get better and better data. We have seen many master data management initiatives by companies that say, we need some data. Frankly, you need some data, you got to build a platform. You go out and do master data management, you will be frustrated because you don't have the discipline, you don't have the platform, you don't have the roles. You can assign the roles, but by themselves, they get nowhere. They get nowhere. Now, this instead, in fact, is still not enough. You're going to have to do the coaching. You got to coach people. And my favorite story is 7-Eleven Japan. We are talking about a company that has 12,000 stores in Japan. And it is convenience stores, about the size of this area where I'm standing here, tiny. They are going to succeed, and they know this from the 1970s. They know they're going to succeed by rapid inventory turnover. And on top of that, they know the only way they're going to get rapid inventory turnover at 12,000 different stores is to put the people in stores in charge of it. So even if you're a part-time clerk, you own a certain part of that store, and you are responsible for ordering goods that will turn over rapidly. New things, old things, whatever you want. And we will give you information. You want to know what sold yesterday? We got it for you. You want to know what sold on the street? We got it for you. You want to know what sold the last rainy day? We got it for you. You want to know what the temperature is going to be today? Here it is. We're going to give you information. Your job is use that information, order things that are going to sell rapidly. Now, we do this all the time. Here's all your information, succeed. Not there. Twice a week, they bring in counselors to work with the people who are placing the orders. And they say, well, what did you hypothesize was going to sell? And how did it do? Let's take a look. Did you do well? Not so well? How could you do better next week? It's over and over. For the rest of their lives, counseling twice a week. Twice a week. Think about how much coaching we do at our typical organization and how we get frustrated that people don't use their information well. Twice a week at 7-Eleven Japan. 30 years running, most profitable retailer, just now being challenged. In the last couple of years being challenged. But this is a company that was divested from the U.S. 7-Eleven and now went back and bought the U.S. 7-Eleven. This company's doing just fine. So this is the evidence-based decision piece. The other thing that's been very fascinating about this research, I got to quit, is the importance of feedback. Pepsi America said that one thing they thought they should do was tell the people in the distribution warehouses how they were performing. You know, how many trucks did you fill today, and how accurate was it? We know this now because we have really great information. So we post it on the wall. And the managers are going, oh my gosh, people don't want their performance on the wall. And they're saying, really, they don't? And they're going, no, they're never going to want that. So the IT people who had this idea said, well, let me just see how it goes. And so they go into the warehouse. And people are going up to this wall, and they're going, ooh, 30th. And then they go off, and it's like they are inspired. Inspired because they know exactly how they're doing. At Allstate, they said, I'm sorry, this wasn't Allstate. This was another insurance company that I can't name. They said, we checked, and we found that the number of claims per person per day in our claims office ranged from 3 to 32 on average. Their average ranged from 3 to 32. And so we said, we're going to tell them. We're going to tell them if they have 3, that they only have 3. The average is 18, and the high is 32. You know what happens? The people who are doing 3 are suddenly doing 18. Because it occurred to them they're really slow, and they should speed up. And somebody knows, and they should care. The people who are doing 32, still doing 32. They're high performers, they like being high performers. But, and in fact, the insurance company said we have to do something about quality, being some of these really fast people don't have the quality. So we have to introduce a second metric here. But they said we have this idea that people would never want to know this, and in fact, they are starved for this information because it gives them all the control over their lives. They can tell. It's not somebody subjectively saying, you know, you're a little slow. This is somebody saying, I have evidence, and you can do something about it. Just go do it. So the whole concept of getting these platforms in place and getting information is about feeding it to people who can use it to make the business great and to spread that responsibility out across everyone in the organization. Okay? So let's wrap up then. 4 things I'd want you to take away. First of all, maturity matters. We cannot fix our organizations in a way. This is in a day. It's a journey. We have to get people on that. As one CIO said to me, we said, get on the train or get under it. I said, okay, I guess people got the message. But in any case, we do want everyone on the train so that we can make consistent progress. The second thing is to recognize that the impact of architecture is escalating. If you're thinking you're going to drive value from process optimization efforts or business intelligence or master data management, collaboration, mobility, I will tell you there's a huge difference in how much benefit a company with a platform in place that knows how to use it, there's a huge difference. How much value they can get out of that versus somebody that's going, oh, let's set up a little committee and send them out and have them do a bunch of stuff around collaboration. The difference is monumental. Monumental. There are companies with platforms that now have enterprise initiatives around collaboration. There are no companies we've seen yet that have powerful collaboration initiatives if they don't have the platform because people don't know what they're collaborating about. Once you got the platform in there, we got it. Okay? Architecture must move beyond IT. I started there. I want to end there. IT architecture is a good thing, but it has very limited impact. And if we are willing to stick there because people say, I'm not interested, we're just not fighting hard enough. We've got to take architecture outside. And then finally, what we have to help business people understand is that our whole way of thinking about the alignment between IT and strategy is upside down. We have to get to a place where we start with some kind of strategic vision of how we're going to fundamentally operate. That is very important. We do start with a strategic vision. But then we go ahead and we start building capabilities, and those things create opportunities. At UPS, the CEO said to me, you know, IT has created such a powerful capability here that whenever we talk strategy, the IT people are in the room and they have ideas for things we can do for customers and we can do them fast. He said, I get that kind of happy surprise from IT all the time. Happy surprise from IT. That is what enterprise architecture is all about. Thank you very much.